We are joined now by Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. And Senator Johnson, I'll start with this since we saw the vote yesterday. 57-40 in the Senate in favor of ending the mask mandate on airplanes, on trains, everything else. Every Republican but Mitt Romney voted yes to do that. And even 8 Democrats voted as well in favor of ending that mandate, many of whom, 4 of them at least, are up for re-election. This means independents are finally starting to get a little bit sane here. Don't you think, Senator Johnson, and recognizing that we're in an absurd situation to be continuing with these pandemic restrictions 2 years into this process?
It certainly proves that public opinion is important, and it helps sway votes. And I noticed the Wall Street Journal opinion poll said about 5% of Americans think COVID is the number one issue facing us. I think people are ready to get on with their lives. Unfortunately, a lot of the COVID cartel is not. They want to continue to push a state of fear. They want to continue to control our lives, and that's unfortunate. But I think the vast majority of Americans just want the pandemic over and move on with their lives.
Senator Johnson, it's Buck. How do you think the Biden administration is handling? You probably saw earlier today the short speech he gave on the situation with Ukraine. There was the Zelensky address to Congress this morning. Is Biden right now, put aside that we shouldn't have been, that this war shouldn't have happened in the first place, and we all agree it's terrible, is the Biden administration making the right moves right now? What would you want them to do differently?
Well, I think the fact that President Zelensky felt he had to come before a joint session of Congress and plead for the help he actually needs, that the Ukrainian people actually need to defend themselves against the atrocity and war crimes of Putin, I think is pretty well proof that Biden is not doing what he should be doing. We should have obviously supplied them a lot more lethal defensive weaponry before Putin ever invaded Ukraine. What we should have also done is taken a full inventory of what other military assets would be available should Putin invade, like the Su-300 anti-aircraft, surface air missiles, like the MiG jets. And we should have got that into Ukraine quietly, without anybody knowing it whatsoever, until those missiles slammed into some Russian jets. But that's not what happened. A mini debacle with the whole dispute over the MiG jets, denying Zelensky some, I think, probably pretty helpful assets. As we saw, they undertook an airstrike against an airfield that Russia had taken over. Listen, the Ukrainians are showing such courage and, quite honestly, skill. In many places, they seem to be fighting Russia to a standstill. They're initiating counteroffensives right now. They need support. And unfortunately, the Biden administration has been slow. They've been dragged in supplying the support. It's really shameful.
Senator Johnson, how much are you concerned? There's been a lot of talk about the jets and what exactly should happen with all of these jets, and whether we should allow Ukrainian pilots to potentially come into Germany and take these jets back into Ukraine. Should we? And where is the line, if we are concerned, where we move from providing support to engaging in some way in direct conflict with Russia, in your mind?
Yeah, I think everybody agrees that we want to avoid direct conflict, but providing them, what's the difference between a MiG jet that can knock down a jet or a Stinger missile that can do the same thing? I mean, we're providing them lethal defensive weaponry. Nobody's contemplating the Ukraine's going to use those for offensive operations into Russia. Let's defend their homeland, their freedom, their families, their children. That's completely appropriate. One thing we're not talking enough about, though, is providing information to the Russian people. We've seen some very courageous Russians protesting. That one news producer, her protest. We need the Russian people to understand what Putin is doing. The best case scenario right now is for the Russian people to depose Vladimir Putin. We need to do everything we can to get the Russian people up to speed with what's actually happening, because, let's face it, Putin is very effective at controlling the media. So that's something we really ought to triple, quadruple our efforts to inform the Russian people what's happening, because they don't support this war. They don't really understand what's happening.
Speaking to Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Senator, the Fed is raising interest rates. As First time it's happened since 2018. A lot of us are looking at this trajectory of the economy with, Biden year 1 in the books. Year 2 looks like it's going to be really shaky. Folks are talking stagflation. Some are even talking recession. What do you see happening here?
Well, I've been warning about stagflation for well over a year. I stopped voting for this COVID relief after the CARES Act because every time we'd vote for a new $1 trillion COVID relief package, we had $1 trillion left unspent from the previous session. I started hearing from Wisconsin businesses pretty early on that just like when I started my business in the early 80s, when price increases were expected and readily accepted, and then 30 years was like pulling teeth getting a price increase, once we started opening up the monetary spigots and just flooded the economy with trillions of dollars, we were sparking inflation. And so for at least over a year, businesses, once again, are in a position where price increases are expected, they're accepted. Of course, I think we're in a wage price spiral right now where the wage gains people have enjoyed have been wiped out by inflation. I just remember how incredibly difficult it was to break that cycle, and it required two people of enormous courage, Ronald Reagan and Paul Volcker, to do that in the early 80s. I'm not seeing a whole lot of courage here in Washington, D.C. today, so I am highly concerned about not only inflation really harming American families, but stagflation on top of that.
Senator Johnson, we're coming up on obviously mid-March, and soon people, including yourself, and I'd encourage people listening on our number one affiliate there, we're ranked the best in the city in Milwaukee to be supporting you all over Wisconsin as people are listening to us. What is going to happen in your mind in Congress between now and when everybody goes back and starts officially campaigning in the summer and the fall season? Do you think we try to get, the Biden administration does, a tax increase? Do they try to break up some of the parts of Build Back Better and pass that? Or do you think, by and large, we're kind of not going to have a lot of activity in Congress in terms of passing bills? How do you read the tea leaves as a Democratic strategy based on what you see on the Hill right now?
Well, my concern is, for whatever reason, Democrats always want to increase taxes on the American public. President Biden said that he wasn't going to increase taxes on anybody making less than $400,000, but it's important to note that inflation is the Democrat tax on the middle class. But there certainly seems a desire on the part of Democrats to spend more money to tax the hard-earned, through the labors of the American public. And so I'm always concerned about that. I've got my antenna up, but hopefully they'll run out of time. Hopefully, again, I am concerned about that because, let's face it, Joe Biden is actually saying the solution to inflation, and he's backed up by a compliant media, is literally more deficit spending. It's insane. It makes no sense, but that's what they actually say. And you got to be careful. You got to watch what they say because they actually carry it out as best they can.
Senator Johnson, building on that, when do you think the congressional session will be over and basically the clock will be run out and everybody will pivot towards midterms? Is it July? When are you anticipating, hey, we're out of D.C. and people don't have to worry about tax increases occurring in 2022 and we can go vote in the midterms?
Well, one of two scenarios. Either we reach the August recess, and I think then it's pretty much campaign mode, or the public opinion polls continue to turn south to a point where Democrats really are afraid that they may be looking at a blowout election here. I think that's, to a certain extent, we're starting to see that scenario, which evidence of that is what happened with the anti-mask mandate vote in the Senate.
Yes.
So even Democrats are concerned about the polls. It's not the science has changed on this stuff. The polls have changed.
Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. Sir, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming by.
Well, I appreciate it. Again, Ron Johnson for Senate.com. I have to add that in there. I need a lot of support.
We encourage everybody to go check out your website and support you as much as they can. Thank you, Senator. Our guest now, who is one of the great writers at OutKick.com, Joe Kinsey, will probably be having a few beers. What's your beer of choice on St. Patrick's Day, Joe?
Guinness. I'm just a Guinness guy. I love Guinness. Give me a Guinness on draft. A lot of head on it, Clay, and I'll suck those down all night.
Careful with the word choice there. All right, let's dive into we got a woke bracket that is up at OutKick that you have done an incredible job on. We're going to get to that in a moment, but first, you're writing this morning
on the situation with the transgender Penn swimmer who had a 3-second win in the 500. This story still not being covered very much in the world of sports because it proves that a biological man who decides to become a woman has a substantial competitive advantage, at least based on the results so far. I believe the Penn transgender swimmer, his biological male, won by 3 seconds in the 500 prelims. What can you tell us about the latest on this story and where it's headed?
Well, Clay, we have Leah Thomas, the transgender Penn swimmer, as you said, she swam a 4:33.82, and it was 3 seconds faster than the next qualifier, Erica Sullivan. So we have a situation that is now the fastest time in the 500 freestyle in the nation this season, even faster than Brooke Forty, who is Pat Forty, Sports Illustrated writer, faster than his daughter, who won, Clay. She won a silver medal at the Olympics in August for the 4x200 freestyle team for the United States. So not only is Leah Thomas dominating the swimming, Leah Thomas is beating Olympic silver medalist, Clay. That is where we're at. We're headed into the finals tonight at 6 p.m. And Leah Thomas, if it stands as it stands now, it's going to be a question if she breaks he breaks the pool record and wins the national title. That's all.
What is the pool? Yeah, what is
point.
that number? What is the pool record? Like, how close is it to being broken?
The pool record is 4:30.81. We're talking 3 seconds. This was the qualifier. This wasn't leave it all on the pool. So 3 seconds could come down tonight. I mean, we could be talking about a new pool record for the NCAA championships.
So just to be very clear, Joe, I don't follow swimming in general in the NCAA level. So when you say pool record, is it then possible that tonight, and I think 6 Eastern, they have the 500 freestyle national championship, right? Tonight you could
Correct.
have a transgender female hold the all-time record for the NCAA for the 500-meter freestyle swim, right? I mean, so it's not – is it possible that it wouldn't just be this year, it would be number one all-time?
So Leah Thomas would have to beat Katie Ledecky, the most decorated women's female swimming champion of all time, who has a 4:24. That is the NCAA record. Leah Thomas would have to beat a 4:24.06. So is it possible? Well, Leah Thomas just swam the fastest time in the nation, and it could fall tonight. We could see an all-time record and a pool record and a national championship. So, yeah, I don't think it's out of the question.
And what are some of the other women? I mean, one of the things that I know you at OutKick and Clay and I have been talking about here, as you guys have been covering the story, is that there's this fear of women who are actually biological women who are swimming against Leah Thomas, and they understand this is biochemically unfair and kind of outrageous to them, but they're worried about speaking out. I mean, are there more people that are coming forward right now, you think, or are they willing to speak to the press more about this? Or are they going to wait until Leah Thomas becomes perhaps the national champion and then there'll be more outcry? How do you see that playing out?
Well, we know that Brooke Forty, who is entering the finals in the 6th place position, we know through her father, who released a statement in January, who said, "I'm perfectly fine with this. Whatever happens, happens." Well, here's what happens. You are an Olympic champion who is now going to lose. As it stands right now, Brooke Forty will lose a national championship to a guy. And Pat Forty, the Sports Illustrated writer, he is on record saying that he understands that this is an unfair playing field here. But they're so far down the woke, they've jumped in so deep in the woke world that they can't now speak out about it, because then they're going to lose their street cred, Buck. they're in this tough situation now where Pat Forty has to watch his daughter lose to prove a point, and now Pat Forty is saying this is all politically driven. These are political people that are making this a problem. Well, Pat, your daughter's about to lose. You know it's a problem, and you're unwilling to speak out about it. So you know what? You almost deserve to lose, right?
Joe, what's crazy too is this Penn transgender swimmer says that the plan is to become a member of the 2024 women's Olympic team. So this story, for people out there who are saying, okay, well, I don't really care that much, and some of you may not care that much about a biological man dominating women's swimming in college, it's a possibility that in a couple of years, this Penn transgender swimmer could be taking away an Olympic position from a biological woman and competing as a woman at the Olympics. I mean, this is full-on woke insanity, right? I mean, there's no other way to describe this.
Clay, as long as these numbers continue, Leah Thomas will be an Olympic swimmer for the United States swimming team. This is not some far-fetched reality. This is what's going to happen if these times maintain. If Leah Thomas maintains these times, Leah Thomas will be on the Olympic team, and Leah Thomas will take a biological female spot on the Olympic team.
We're speaking to Joe Kinsey of OutKick.com. He's got a story up on Leah Thomas smashing the records, the times of biological females in the NCAA Swimming Championship preliminary rounds. Joe, to the point about the Olympics, one thing Clay and I have been talking about is how once this starts to be, look, NCAA swimming, there's obviously no money in it. Or I don't know, maybe you can sell your identity or not identity. You know what I mean?
I think that's already
that's a different thing. You can sell your image and likeness. That's what I was trying to think of. But in general, there's no money in swimming. But when you get to gold medals and when you get to Olympic medalists, I've seen assessments that say that that's worth seven figures to people in terms of endorsements and speaking engagements, etc. So how does the International Olympic Committee treat this situation? I mean, do we know what are the rules about someone like Leah Thomas, a transgender swimmer, competing for actual medals at an actual Olympics?
Well, Buck, they've been rewriting the legislation, and they've got pages and pages of you gotta go through this process, and you gotta prove this, and you gotta go before the doctors. But let's face it, Buck, everything that they've written this year as far as legislation is none of it is going to stop Leah Thomas from competing for a spot on that team. None of it, Buck. Because Leah Thomas came out a week or two ago and said, listen, I am going to go back and go get a law degree or something like that, I guess, and I am going to train for the Olympics. And this is not going to stop Leah Thomas. There's nothing that the U.S. Olympic team that has put forward to stop a transgender swimmer from competing in the London Games. And that is where this is headed. We are seeing the early stages of what is setting up for one of the most insane stories in Olympic history.
You mentioned, and I want to get to this because I think people will love it, the amount of American sports media that is woke is like, what do you think, Joe? You've been doing this for a long time. 95%, if you were analyzing as people in sports media, what percentage of them do you think voted Biden over Trump?
Oh, my God. It's easily into the 90s, and I would have to say into the mid-90s. Clay, we have very few instances where we know of blue check marks that aren't in the woke world.
I'm one of the few, right? I'm one of the few who's actually come out and said I was willing to vote for. Well, the reason why I bring this up with you, Joe, is because you mentioned Pat Forty, who writes now, I believe, at Sports Illustrated. His daughter is an Olympian, which is an incredible accomplishment. She may lose her chance to win an NCAA championship to a guy. And Pat Forty is in some way defending this, and he is a part. You've done this as the second year in a row where we have a woke sports media bracket challenge. For people out there who like to do bracket voting and have fun with it, you've got 20 different woke sports media members. Last year, Jamel Hill, who memorably called the president a white supremacist, and got to keep working at ESPN. She won, so she's been we've pulled her out of the ranks. But this is pretty entertaining. 20 different people all competing for the title of OutKick's Woke Bracket Challenge winner.
Clay, this has become my calling card. You know, the readers request it. They want the bracket. They want the Woke All-Star Challenge. Listen, we had trouble coming up with number one seeds. There were so many people that could have been a number one seed in this bracket. We have Rex Chapman, your buddy. He's one of the craziest.
Buck, you even know these guys. Listen to the one seeds. Rex Chapman, who is insufferable on social media. We've got Keith Olbermann, who you texted me this morning, is trying to steal somebody else's show at MSNBC.
Yep. He's a true lunatic.
Darren Ravel, who covers sports media and business and has turned into an insane man over COVID. He wears like 40 different masks a day. And then we've got Mina Kimes, who has gotten into a woke battle. So people love this. I mean, you even, Buck, I think will enjoy it. So we have odds makers putting up lines, breaking down the matchup, and then we just let everybody vote for it. And people flood in like crazy to read Joe's breakdown.
Yeah, Clay, the thing about the Woke Challenge is we have competitors that I think love the Woke Challenge, and they're trying to win it, Clay. They really want to win this.
Yeah.
Keith Olbermann, I mean, he went nuts this week. He wants to win this, Clay. This is what it's all about. They want to prove how woke they are, and this is one of the ways they do it.
There's no such thing as too woke to the woke. That's what you have to remember. They can always be crazier, and it sounds like, gentlemen, they're going to try to prove it.
Yes, so go check it out. Joe, we appreciate the time. OutKick.com. People can go check out the Woke Bracket. They can follow you at Joe Kinsey EXP. I'll tweet out your handle if people are enjoying it, and they can stay a way as well. Joe, appreciate the time. Enjoy the games and enjoy St. Patrick's Day, bud.
See you guys.
We're joined now by Senator Rand Paul from the state of Kentucky. Senator Paul, do you fill out a bracket? Buck had never filled one out in his life before this year.
Where has he been? Under a rock his whole life?
I know.
I mean, my goodness. Well, see, my bracket, I haven't looked at it lately, but it would include Baylor, UK, and Kentucky. But I don't know if all three of those can make the Final Four. Somebody has to beat somebody somewhere.
Yeah, Baylor and Kentucky could end up going head-to-head before all is said and done. But let's dive in. We just played a cut, Senator, with Dr. Fauci, who appears to be in a bunker by the Biden administration. They're trying to hide him. But he did an interview, I don't know if you've seen this yet, with a local San Diego news station where he said it may be necessary to re-implement masks and all the other restrictions if we have another surge. Your reaction when you hear that?
If there ever was one American who would have a pessimistic approach to, the pandemic going away, it would have to be Fauci. I was hoping that he was in the witness protection program and we would never see him again. But, he keeps creeping back up. But no, this has been true at every stage of the game. When we talked about kids going back to school, he's like, well, we just don't know. When we talked about whether or not you get immunity from the disease, when you've had COVID, do you have immune protection? Well, we just don't know. But his conclusion would all.
Did we just lose a senator?
Freedom.
Oh, there we go.
You still there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
go
we
ahead.
got you.
And, at every turn, though, Fauci really, his inclination is towards authoritarianism. His inclination is towards taking our liberty away. He's even said when asked, is individual liberty important? He's like, well, not so much. So, but no, I think we should quit taking advice from him. And I think the American people are ready. I mean, we had the vote this week where 57 of us voted to get rid of the mask mandate on planes. We had 8 Democrats join us, which is a first.
What is wrong with, I'm just going to ask you, Senator, the Democrats in the Senate, do they actually believe this? I mean, I would like to think that at some level they're smart enough to understand that just masking on planes is idiocy, but that this is just about the political optics for them? Or are some of your Democrat colleagues in the Senate so emotionally damaged from the COVID and the masking and Fauciism that they really somehow think that masking for less than 1% of a person's life is going to keep them safe from the virus?
Very few of them have ever had a science course. I mean, about 80 years ago when they were in high school, they might have had some basic science, but we've got very few on the other side that are scientists, physicians, chemists, engineers. So we have people that are not very knowledgeable on science, but there are also people who have a tendency to like collectivism, to like the collective judgment of somebody telling them what to do and the idea of submission. And this is a real problem. I mean, there was a poll about a month ago that asked Democrats, if someone is unvaccinated, would you be fine with incarcerating them? Over half of Democrats thought it'd be fine to indefinitely detain people who chose not to be vaccinated. So this is the kind of people we're dealing with, and we're just on, opposite sides of the coin on this. But I think what they've finally discovered, 8 of the Democrats who voted to get rid of the mandate this week, 4 of them are in competitive races. So, and the other couple are in Republican states. So I think it's pushing forward. I think there are moms and dads who are Democrats and independents that see the hypocrisy of, oh yeah, my 2-year-old has to wear a mask, and yet I see 80-year-old senators, having a chummy conversation with the President Biden, in the Oval Office. So there's no consistency or any science to any of this, and I think people are just tired of the submission just for submission's sake.
Senator Paul, I'm assuming you saw the New York Times has acknowledged that now, those Hunter Biden emails in the laptop, it's real. I know we've talked with you about the possibility of getting an investigation going of Fauci and also of everything surrounding COVID in general. It's imperative that people vote for the House to be taken back and the Senate to be taken back to give you guys the power to ask these kind of important questions, isn't it?
I can tell people for certain that if the Senate is taken over, I will have a chairmanship and I will use subpoena power to get to the bottom of this. In particular, I want to know the origins of the virus, and I want to know if Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins covered it up. We have a great deal of evidence that they did, but we still have several emails that were redacted, and I want to know what happened there, and we're going to find that out. Some of that information does exist, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. We're also going to get to the bottom of a CDC that is leaving out large segments of studies to try to bolster their conclusions. So should a 20-year-old get a booster, which I think is crazy on the surface of it? Well, they studied the question, and they found in a large study that does between 18 and 49, which is 132 million people, that there was no benefit of a booster. So what did they do? They left it out of the study. See, if you were in charge of a scientific journal, you should be fired. But if you're in part of government and you're, picking and choosing the different parts of the data and leaving it out if it doesn't fit your conclusion, that's a fireable offense. And yet they're doing that on a routine basis, and they're destroying the reputation of the CDC and government in general.
Senator Paul, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
I am now joined by the former Attorney General under President Trump and Attorney General once before that as well. Yeah. Also author of One Damn Thing After Another, which is already a big bestseller. It's available now. I want to go pick it up, get your copy of it. Bill Barr. Bill, good to see you.
Great to be here, Buck.
So you already made some news earlier today. You talked on Fox about the Afghanistan withdrawal from the Biden administration and how you think that created a pathway, a green light, a perception among Putin and his top advisors about Ukraine. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, well, Putin's red line has always been he doesn't want NATO right on the border of Russia, so he didn't want Ukraine going into NATO. But there was no urgency about that. It wasn't as if that was going to happen anytime soon. And I felt after Biden won the election that Putin would decide he didn't need to negotiate. He could take what he wanted under Biden. And then when there was Afghanistan, and I put that in my book, and then when Afghanistan occurred, I think that crystallized Putin's view that this guy was weak.
How do you think it's been handled since the invasion, since the tanks rolled into Ukraine, from the Biden point of view, the diplomacy, all of that?
Well, it's hard to say since the tanks rolled in, because he should have been putting the weaponry in before the tanks rolled. We knew that this was a big risk of him moving in, and the name of the game was deterrence. But he didn't put the weapons in at that point. That would have made Putin's stop if the MiGs had been transferred and weapons had been transferred. Now, since the invasion, I think generally he's been doing the right thing in terms of arming and supplying the Ukrainians and rallying NATO support, although sometimes it's NATO rallying our support. We always seem to be half a step behind.
And I want to ask you about election integrity, because we got a midterm coming up here. Democrats are not looking like they're in a good spot. That's based on every poll that anybody could point to and see. People still have very intense feelings, as you know, about the last election, and going forward, there should be some questions that are answered about what either went wrong or could go wrong the next time around. Went wrong that time, could go wrong the next time. What are the biggest challenges, as you see it, as the former Attorney General and somebody who was right on the forefront of this issue, to an election in this midterm that people can say, it's not perfect, but it's good enough that we can have full faith in it?
Well, I feel there are really two issues. One issue is, and I stress this from my confirmation hearing all the way through, we're a very divided country. All we have going for us is peaceful transfer of power through elections. And if we lose confidence in that, we're in a very bad spot. So everything has to be done to ensure the integrity of the election. In my opinion, the Democrats throughout the country have been reckless and irresponsible because they essentially have been pushing for elections on the honor system. And I believe we should have – the fact of the matter is, unless you have the system in place at the time of the election, it's hard to come back afterward and find the fraud and have a remedy. And so I am all for stepping up all the integrity measures we can, stopping this idea that we should roll back or dilute these measures, because if you do, people won't have confidence in the election. Whether or not you can prove fraud, they will not have confidence. Now, as you know, on this particular election, I did not see evidence, and I'm fairly confident that there was not fraud at the level that would have affected the outcome of the election. But that does not mean that we should not step up all the efforts we can to make sure they're fair and accurate.
Speaking of former Attorney General Bill Barr, the book One Damn Thing After Another is out now. Those of you want to hear or read, rather, more about what it was to be the Attorney General under President Trump, what he had to deal with. And I want to ask you, because you came into the center of the storm on Russia collusion. You came in when that was already a maelstrom meant to harm the Trump administration in every way possible. It is beyond any doubt that this was rooted in lies, that this was false intelligence laundered through the top reaches of the government. And you know, I can't get into everything right now. People know listening about all the things that happen here, the media working with the deep state and all this. Are we ever going to get a full accounting for what happened in your mind? I know there's still the Durham investigation underway. Is this something that the American people should think at some point will really know the full extent of what happened?
Yes, I think he will get to the bottom of what happened as far as is humanly possible to get the evidence and lay it out for the American people. I mean, that's one of the reasons I was persuaded ultimately to come in to the administration. I had been Attorney General before, and it wasn't that attractive a proposition to me, to be frank. But I felt we were heading toward a constitutional crisis. I was very skeptical of this whole Russiagate thing from the beginning. And what you say is right. It was a dirty trick. It was a sham. And I never felt there was a predication for investigating the Trump campaign. And I felt very soon that the real issue was, how did this damn thing get started? And that's why I appointed Durham to get to the bottom of it. Now, you know, Durham didn't have the benefit of the Inspector General's report until the end of 2019, and then we had COVID. So it hasn't been as fast as I wanted, and it's frustrating. But there's no doubt in my mind he'll get to the bottom of it. And if there's charges to be brought, I think he'll bring them.
Was it even beyond your expectations as a dirty trick? Once you were inside of government at the top level of law enforcement, the Attorney General got to see and experience and be around what was going on then. I think it's hard for people to imagine from the outside what it must be like to be the Attorney General when there's essentially a soft coup attempt underway from a real collusion between the media, some elements of the federal bureaucracy, and the Democrat Party and the Hillary campaign all at once.
That's right. You know, I came in, we had had 8 years of Obama administration. And taking over an agency after that, certainly the complexion of the agency had changed since the last time when I took over after Reagan. But I was shocked at the lack of basis for the FBI's action, and to me, it's inexplicable. For example, the dossier came from somebody who had been suspected and investigated of being a Russian agent, and that had never been resolved, and yet they seemed to take the dossier and run with it. Never went back to check on it. So I was shocked at the lack of basis for the FBI's conduct.
Just wondering if you have any thoughts as somebody who knows the D.C. and federal legal and judiciary circuit quite well. Nominee for the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson. What do you think?
I think she'll be just what the progressive wing of the Democratic Party could hope for, everything they could hope for in a nominee. She'll be very, very much over on the left.
Is it kind of sad to watch the Supreme Court become so... I mean, people always say it's not political, and then they have a political argument about it.
Yes.
I don't think that's... I think it's unserious at this phase now to pretend that it hasn't become, at some level, an instrument of politics. Do you think we ever get back from that?
Well, I hope that the conservative majority takes us back from that. But you're right. That's where it was headed. And I think that is essentially the view of the left, which it's a super legislature that should, take their bearings from the zeitgeist and then impose their will. But I think because of our conservative majority, I think we can pull back from that.
Former Attorney General Bill Barr, the book, One Damn Thing After Another. Go check it out for yourself. Bill, thanks so much for being here. Good to see you.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.
We have our friend Alex Berenson with us now, as promised, here on the Clay and Buck Show. He is author of Pandemia, which is a bestseller, despite big tech trying to make it tough for him, because it's a great book. I've got my copy at home. Also subscribe to his Substack. Lots of excellent reporting and analysis there. Mr. Alex Berenson, great to have you as always.
Thank you. Thanks, Buck. Where's Clay? Is he watching some college basketball or something?
Oh, he's betting it all on lucky number 7 in Vegas. He's out there doing some sports stuff, and he said, Buck, I'm going to throw you the keys to the Ferrari. You're going to drive it today solo. And I said, sir, yes, sir. So here we are.
All right.
But tell me this one, because I see this. I got mixed feelings. On the one hand, Fauci has reappeared, as we just discussed before you came on, and he's already saying, we've got to be ready to go back to whatever level of mitigation. And I just want to start screaming profanity when I hear that. I honestly want to completely lose my mind. And anybody who goes along with this, I want to yell at them too. But here's what we've got. Let's look at the data. And I know you sent this out in your most recent Substack, an analysis of this. This is the New York Times. In South Korea, a spike in COVID cases meets a collective shrug. South Korea has reported its peak daily coronavirus infection number at 621,328 cases in a country of 50 million people. So this would be like a few million cases in one day in America. What is going on here, Alex? Because they're 90% plus vaccinated in South Korea. They were so strict on the masking and everything, and now they're having their this, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, all-time high caseload for South Korea for COVID in one day.
Yes, I mean, and not just that. I mean, this is, as far as I can tell, and I follow this pretty closely, this is the highest number that any major country has ever seen in terms of a percentage of its population in a single day. So it's the equivalent of 4 million cases. And this is not like, we grouped a month of testing and we reported in one day. No. They had 400,000 the day before. They had 400,000 the day before that. Then they had 600,000. They are everyone in the country is getting Omicron. Okay, here's what's happening. It's very simple. The mRNA vaccines not only offer no protection against Omicron after, maybe 2 months after that, you get your second dose or you get your booster dose. It's now pretty clear that not long after that, they actually accelerate the transmission because they reduce your protection from infection. So protection actually goes below zero, meaning you're more likely to be infected if you've been vaccinated than not with Omicron. And we could talk about why biologically that is, but
can you put that, because this big thing, Alex, I got so many things. Can you try to put that in layman's terms for us, how that could possibly, because you hear that, I mean, I'm sure people's heads are exploding. How could that even fit? Let's just assume, I mean, I'm sure people would argue and everything else. Let's assume that's true. How could it be true that the vaccines have negative efficacy?
Okay, so and it is true. Okay, the data it's not just from South Korea or New Zealand or Canada or Britain or even the United States or Denmark. It's from all these places. Okay, people who are vaccinated are getting infected more rapidly with Omicron. Okay, the reason probably is, almost certainly is, that the vaccines are very powerful. Okay, they make you produce antibodies to the spike protein of the coronavirus. That's what they do. Okay, you get this RNA, your body produces all these spikes, your body then recognizes that there are these spikes in it, and it needs to produce antibodies to it. Great, that's what they do. That's what they're supposed to do. There's only one problem. The spike has mutated. The coronavirus has mutated. It has probably mutated directly as a result of the fact that the vaccines are so powerful in this way. So if you're the virus, and you're not thinking about this, but you're doing it anyway, you evolve away from the antibodies that all these vaccinated people have. So the Omicron spike is different. It looks different. You know, they can do this essentially modeling of what it looks like in a very, complicated way. It's this tiny little thing, but they can predict what it's going to look like, and it doesn't look the same. That means that the antibodies that your body has made, not all of them work as well against it as they did against the original spike, okay, if you've been vaccinated. And you don't have any other antibodies. Here's the other thing, Buck. If you're not vaccinated against the coronavirus and you get the coronavirus, once you beat it, you have antibodies to the spike. You also have antibodies to the other parts of the coronavirus. That's how natural immunity works. None of those people who got vaccinated have antibodies to the other parts of the coronavirus until they get infected with the coronavirus itself, and maybe not even then, because these vaccines have wrong-footed our immune systems. Okay,
that's a stunning. I mean, obviously, people are going to flip out about this, Alex, but you're no stranger to that. But I would want to know. I mean, let me just, so everyone listening to this can have a sense, a full spectrum sense of the argument. Try to tell us, and I know this is, I almost can't say this out loud. Fauci and the rest are talking about the need, forget about mitigation measures for a second, but there's still a talk about shot number 4. And you just had, I think it was Moderna, shot number 4, emergency authorization for everybody. How can they tell us when South Korea is over 90% as an entire country vaccinated and somehow hitting an all-time high caseload for COVID right now, that the shots are a good idea at this point? Like, what's the Fauci explanation?
So they're going to say two things, okay? And things are true, but they don't change the overall picture that I'm painting for you. They're going to say, A, if you get that 4th shot, your antibodies are going to go back up. That's true. Okay, so what happens is you get the 1st shot and the 2nd shot, and after the 2nd shot, you have a ton of antibodies, more antibodies than you would have if you've been infected and recovered. Your body doesn't actually want to have that many antibodies, so it very rapidly cuts them down. And in a few months, you don't have more antibodies than you would have had after natural infection. And again, you don't have the same diversity of antibodies. Okay, so then they boost you, your antibodies go back up. If they boost you again, they'll go up again. The problem is the same thing happens again. Your antibodies go right back down. Okay, and you don't get another kind of protection in the same way following vaccination. You don't get what's called cellular immunity. Okay, you don't get the same breadth of T cell responses. Again, it gets really complicated, but your listeners are going to have to believe me on this. There's tons of data on it. So what these people will tell you is, we think / hope that if we give you another shot, it's going to improve what's called the efficacy of your antibodies. They're going to become more mature. They're going to become better at attacking all kinds of spikes. There's not really good evidence for that. It's more a hope that they have. Okay, they have to tell you something. What they're really trying to do is just buy a couple months. Okay, they're really just trying to jack your antibodies up again, so that if you're infected in the short term, you have so many antibodies that even though they're not sort of optimized against this spike enough of them will work against this spike that you'll have some protection against serious disease and death. That's really all they are hoping to do at this point, and anybody who says otherwise is essentially lying.
Here's also from this New York Times piece about South Korea having a huge spike in cases right now, everybody, just so everyone's on the same page here. Everyone used to be hush-hush about getting infected like you were causing a nuisance, according to a bartender who owns 2 cocktails in Central Seoul. He added, the perception now is it's like getting a cold. Okay, this is in the New York Times, so I know they're just citing some random person, but the perception in South Korea, and they're choosing to highlight this, is it's like getting a cold at this point. Well, if that's true, why are they still? I mean, New York City has employment mandate shots still, and they're talking about bringing back more shots in the fall.
Right. So all these people, they're sort of caught between all the lies. Okay. So Omicron, the one thing they have going for them is that Omicron is less virulent than Delta was or the original wild type virus was. Okay. So a lot of people, especially younger people, healthier people, yes, you get it. Everyone gets it. I think we all know that now. Everyone, boosted or not, vaccinated or not, gets Omicron. Most of those people, if you're young, you basically don't have much problem with it, right? Most of the time. And these people want to pretend that's because of the vaccines. It's not true. It's just because most people, and when I say young, I really mean under 70 or so, if you're not morbidly obese, you're not gonna have that much trouble with Omicron. Okay, so the smart thing to do would just be essentially to let this fade out, okay, to do what the South Koreans are doing, just to say, you know what, everyone's going to get it, and there's not much we can do about it at this point. But for whatever reason, Fauci, these people, they're not there yet. And so, and it's partly their own fault. It's largely their own fault because the vaccines don't work. There's so many cases right now worldwide and in the United States. There's still a lot of deaths. They're at a level that we were told was unacceptable when Donald Trump was president. So they can't just say, you know what, like, yes, 30,000 people a month are dying with/from COVID. And yes, there's all these infections, but no, we can't do anything about it. We tried, we failed. We just have to live with this going forward. I guess politically it is impossible for them to say that. So they are promoting this thing that anybody who looks at the data in a broad way can see does not work. Okay, you have to look at the worldwide numbers, and you have to look at countries that are really highly vaccinated, whether it's South Korea or Denmark or the UK. There's a lot of countries that are more highly vaccinated than the United States, and they have tons of infections and lots of deaths right now. The mRNA vaccines have failed.
Wow.
They were a nice idea, but they don't work biologically as we hoped.
Alex Berenson, everybody, subscribe to his Substack and get your copy of Pandemia. Alex, always appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Talk soon, Buck.
The New York Times has an op-ed out from the editorial board. So this is from the combined intellectual might of such luminaries as Charles Blow and Maureen Dowd, and I don't know who else works for the editorial board there, but other folks, Thomas Friedman. They're saying, for all the tolerance and enlightenment that modern society claims, Americans are losing hold of a fundamental right as citizens of a free country, the right to speak their minds and voice their opinions in public without fear of being shamed or shunned. End quote. Problem is, the New York Times is the problem when it comes to the First Amendment, and so many other places just like it. So I want to bring on our friend Dovid Efune right now. He's a longtime friend of mine in the world of media. Dovid is the publisher of the newly relaunched New York Sun, nysun.com. Dovid, great to have you on.
It's always a pleasure, Buck.
Something rich here about the New York Times suddenly discovering that the First Amendment is something that liberals no longer really hold to, and therefore are not actually liberals in any classical sense. And beyond that, I'm sure you saw, Dovid, that at Yale University, a speaker was shouted down, a conservative speaker, so aggressively that the police had to be called. This is at Yale.
Yeah, I mean, look, the trail of bodies is far too long for the New York Times to be taken seriously on this issue. I mean, look at the likes of Barry Weiss, Adam Rubenstein, James Bennett, their editorial page editor, Donald McNeil was a health correspondent. These are New York Times journalists who were forced out because they made others at the New York Times uncomfortable. I mean, even as we speak, there is a note appended to that infamous Tom Cotton or famous Tom Cotton op-ed, where the New York Times says, after publication, this essay met strong criticism from many readers, and based on that review, we have concluded that the essay fell short of our standards and should not have been published. So really,
can we just remind everybody, Dovid, that was about saying, as a sitting U.S. Senator writing, that the National Guard should be sent in to stop massive riots in the summer of 2020 under BLM's banner from continuing.
Right, exactly right. And, facing pushback instead of sticking up for Senator Cotton's right to say what he had to say, even if it made some people at the Times uncomfortable, they still have a note on the website saying that the essay fell short of our standards and should not have been published. It fell short because it made people uncomfortable. So here's the New York Times really engaging what I might call in firefighter arson. They're responsible for setting these fires that they're now claiming that they want to put out. And the fires that they're talking about are contributing to the creation of an environment where many Americans, truthfully, don't feel comfortable saying what they really think or what they feel.
Also in this New York Times op-ed, they write, Americans feel the burden of this and know it exists. In a national poll commissioned by the New York Times Opinion and Siena College, only 34% of Americans said they believe that all Americans enjoyed freedom of speech completely. The poll found that 84% of adults said it is a very serious or somewhat serious problem that some Americans do not speak freely in everyday situations because of fear of retaliation or harsh criticism. To this, I just say the 34% who believe Americans actually have free speech in this country, I think they're the same ones who cheer on the big tech shutdown of the entirely accurate Hunter Biden laptop story. The hardcore authoritarian left, which has managed to decades ago pretend to be about free speech, but now that they have seized the commanding heights of information dissemination and control of journalism and the news media, they want to shut everybody down, Dovid.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that, and the numbers that the Times publishes there make it quite clear that those that are more in favor of that kind of policing of free speech, creating what you might call a lateral fear society, it's not coming from the government per se, but coming from others in society, especially major media outlets who see their role as, policing what people can think and what they can say. They have really been the ones who created that environment, and the Times' own numbers that they publish show that a lot of that is coming from the far left.
Speaking of Dovid Efune, publisher of the New York Sun, which has just been relaunched, and Dovid, I wanted to ask you about that. This is a newspaper with a long history in New York City, and you've now taken the helm, and you and your team are working to make this, a kind of antidote to the madness of the New York Times? Tell us about it.
Well, there's definitely that in the New York Sun's history, and I want to encourage everybody to go and check it out. It's www.nysun.com, and consider being a part of it. The New York Sun was founded in 1833. That's 18 years before the New York Times was founded. It's got that 200 years of history. In fact, Lincoln during the Civil War. It really has been a fundamental pillar of American journalism. But really what it's specialized in is in its role of being in touch with the people and serving as a voice for the people. Its masthead declares the famed slogan, "It shines for all, a voice for all people," not just for the woke or for limited audiences. And really that's in bringing back the Sun. It's been a response to our concern and the concern of many over the way that major media outlets conduct themselves today, especially on this issue, especially in policing what thought is acceptable and what thought isn't. And, the Sun has this fantastic tradition, incredible history, 200 years of history. It's got Pulitzer Prizes. It's that Gothic masthead, New York broadsheet. So in many ways, it really is that parallel to the Times and really competed with the Times in its first iteration and then more recently on the newsstands from 2002 until 2008 in New York City. And now we're bringing it back primarily as a digital enterprise, but with a reach across the United States. Look, we know that there are a lot of people that are departing from standard media consumption, mainstream media consumption, if you will. But our thought is that the American way is to participate in building a better alternative. And that's what we're offering here with the New York Sun, and invite everybody to be a part of it. nysun.com.
Dovid Efune, publisher of the newly relaunched New York Sun. Dovid, great to have you, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Always a pleasure, Buck.
John is actually with us now. John, thanks for calling in.
Buck, how you doing? Nice to talk to you again.
Thanks for coming to join. Well, I was going to say come to join us today. It's just me, but we're always appreciative of you calling in. Tell us, what made you think that this was the song to write at this point in time?
I think the whole dynamic changed. When Secretary Blinken basically offered Zelensky a plane ticket, and he said, save your plane ticket, send me some stingers and maybe a few MiGs. I think a lot of were like, who is this guy? We've been used to decades of passivity, from the West. Start with Obama in Crimea, the Syria red line that was lost in the sand. And, the only thing we talk about Hong Kong is LeBron trying to cancel Daryl Morey. We shrugged our shoulders at Hong Kong. And finally, here's some comedian standing up to authoritarianism. And I think the person probably more shocked than anyone is Putin. So how can you not be inspired by this guy, his strength, and the Ukrainian people?
How's the song been met so far by the folks listening? Are you seeing it catching on even more than you had anticipated?
Yeah, way more. I really had no expectation. It was one of those songs that you kind of write in the moment. I wrote it, recorded it, put it out within 48 hours, just kind of as kind of a scream. And I do think that folks around the world are finding strength in this man. I mean, you saw this week the prime ministers of Poland and Slovenia and Czechoslovakia went to Kyiv. You could not have imagined that weeks ago. Russian reporters are starting to betray Putin in the press. And again, I think they're just following his example. Courage is contagious.
Speaking of John Ondrasik, singer, songwriter, Grammy nominated, and of 5 for Fighting. He's got a new song, Can One Man Save the World, about Volodymyr Zelensky and his fight against Vladimir Putin in Russia. Tell me this, where can folks go to hear the song, John? Where should they go if they want to check out the full 3 minutes or so?
Well, thanks, Buck. Yeah, the usual streaming, Spotify, Apple Music. There's a YouTube lyric video up there, Can One Man Save the World. But also, if you want a free download, it's important to me that this song is given away for free. Just go to 5forfighting.com, download the song for free, share it around the world. I think every voice on this thing matters, and we have to support this guy. It's certainly, I think, a critical point in history.
John Ondrasik. John, thanks for stopping by. I always appreciate you calling in.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Clay and I, just earlier this week, had a discussion with Captain Deplorable, as he is known to his fans, and we did a fake interview of Donald Trump that I think you're going to want to hear because it really is fun, and we all like Trump, but we had fun with it. Play it. All right, so we have an absolute favorite Trump impersonator out there, Sean Farash, who makes Alec Baldwin sound like an amateur when he does his Trump. No question about it. Sean is phenomenal at it, and he's also one of us. He is somebody who supports President Trump and does a great impersonation of him as well. Go to CaptainDeplorable45.com. Clay and I thought it'd be fun to have Sean on for the best fake Trump interview we could possibly do. And with that, we'll get right to it. So, Mr. President, or Mr. Fake President, what do you want to say to the people out there across America who miss you and want you back?
Well, listen, you called me Mr. Fake President. If that was my real name, would be Sleepy Joe Biden, okay? Because I'm not the fake president, but I'm probably the realest president the world has ever seen. Vladimir Putin would never have done it. He never would have dared to touch another country, when I was in office, and he didn't do it. They said I was a puppet, and I clearly wasn't a puppet. I was the one thing holding the world together when you look at it, peace in the Middle East. Putin wasn't doing anything. And Little Rocket Man, he stopped shooting bottle rockets. He stopped shooting them. He stopped shooting missiles all over the place over Japan. So I'm your favorite president, not the fake president. I'm your favorite president, and I love your show. And you two do a tremendous job. And to the American people who want me back, the best is yet to come, believe me.
Do you think you could beat up Joe Biden if the two of you got into a fight? Do you remember when he was saying he'd like to take you behind the schoolyard or whatever? What do you think would happen if you two actually got into a fight?
Well, I think what would happen, it wouldn't last very long. If you look at it, He could barely make it up the stairs. We call it Stair Force 1. You know, he fell 3 times. Stair Force 1 when you look at it. He fell, and then he fell again. And just to make matters worse, he fell a 3rd time. So I don't think he wants to go behind any sort of, he called it a high school gym. You know, the only thing he wants to do behind the high school gym is maybe check on Hunter. You know what goes on behind the school, so it's a terrible thing. Maybe he wants to check on Hunter, but I don't think he wants to start a fight. I don't think that's what he's looking for. He's very sleepy.
We're speaking here to a version of former President Trump, and so, Mr. President, I'm just wondering. I mean, what are the calculations that you're making right now about whether you're going to come back and run in 2024? What are you thinking about?
Well, we can't say it, but we could say it, but we can't say it. You know, I say it all the time. We're going to do it a 3rd time. We're going to do it a 3rd time. They say, what is it? I said, you know, we can't actually say it because then they're going to come after me. The fake news, you know, the fake news, CNN. Their heads have been spinning for so long, ever since Clay. You know, he talked to Brooke Baldwin. She was a fantastic person. The First Amendment is what he said, and some other things, you know, and I have to say he's a fantastic person for saying that the First Amendment, and then Brooke Baldwin lost her mind. But you watch it, the fake news is going to say he's announcing too early. If he says it now, he's announcing too early. He's breaking the law, so we're not going to say it, but we're going to say we're going to do it a 3rd time. When you think about it, we're going to do it a 3rd time, and everybody's going to love it, believe me.
Mr. President, we got the NCAA tournament underway, and I know you're a big sports fan historically. What do you think of the NCAA tournament as we're finally getting back to some form of normalcy? And did you fill out a bracket? You know, Buck here, he hasn't filled out a bracket before in his life until this year. Can you believe it?
Well, they call it March Madness, and I think the real madness is happening over in Ukraine. We have no idea what's going on. They call it March Madness. I saw somebody, his name is Comfortably Smug. He's on Twitter. He's a fantastic person. They have the liberal hack March Madness, and the number 1 seed is Brian Stelter. Would you believe it? The number 1 seed is Brian Stelter for the liberal hack tournament of the year. I don't watch a lot of basketball anymore. You know, a lot of things, they happen. These kids, they're fantastic athletes. Then they go to the NBA, and all of a sudden everything becomes about China, and I think it's a disgrace. So I watched the liberal hack tournament, and I have Brian Stelter winning it all. Nobody's a bigger hack than Brian Stelter, maybe except for Rachel Maddow, but nobody's a bigger hack than Brian Stelter, number 1 seed. Haven't filled out a bracket for basketball because we've been dealing with a bunch of things. But I look forward to seeing both tournaments. It's going to be wonderful.
What about your boy Jeff Zucker losing his job at CNN? Did you take some small measure of glee or pleasure in that?
Every time one of these people goes away, you know, every time. You saw Jack Dorsey, he's gone. You saw Jeff Zucker, he's gone. You saw even Andrew Cuomo in New York, he's gone. And now replaced by, I call her Cuomo in a dress. We talk about it, Kathy Hochul. It's like Scooby-Doo. You're going to pull off her face, and Andrew Cuomo's going to be there. She's Cuomo in a dress. She's actually worse. Every time one of these people leaves, they get replaced by somebody even worse. The new person on Twitter, even worse. You're looking at the new guy at CNN, even worse. He came from The Daily Show. You know, I think he came from Stephen Colbert. What a disgrace. He came from there, and now is leading CNN. I love seeing Jeff Zucker. He's out of there. It's a wonderful thing to get him out of the picture. If this didn't happen, Project Veritas would have found a way to get rid of him because they had a lot of things. They were on all the conference calls. But he's gone, and we're happy he's gone. And the lower CNN's ratings go, it is better for the country.
Captain Deplorable45.com, Sean Farash, or President Trump. Mr. President, thanks so much for being with us, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
I got to tell you, so that was the end of that interview, and it's really Captain Deplorable is really talented. I mean, that's there are a lot of people that try to do good Trump impersonations. I appreciate a good impersonation.